A group of students sits in a circle, engaged in a passionate debate about the Arab-Israeli conflict. One student, Josh, stands up and begins to speak.
Okay guys, let's get down to business. We're here to talk about the Arab-Israeli conflict, and I think we should start by addressing some of the key questions that have been raised about the issue. Are you ready?
The other students nod in agreement.
Great. Let's start with question number 1. Why is there more outrage for Gaza than for other conflict zones, like Syria and Yemen?
The students murmur in agreement, and one of them, Sarah, speaks up.
I think it's because the situation in Gaza is more visible to the world. There are more news reports and images coming out of Gaza, so people are more aware of what's happening there.
That's a good point. But what about the fact that Gaza is a smaller conflict zone than Syria or Yemen? Shouldn't we be more outraged about the larger conflicts?
The students nod in agreement, and another student, Mike, speaks up.
I think it's because the conflict in Gaza is seen as more of a David and Goliath situation. Israel is seen as the stronger power, so people feel more sympathy for the weaker side.
Interesting. Okay, let's move on to question number 2. Why weren't the Palestinians granted statehood between 1948 and 1967 when they were under Arab rule?
The students look thoughtful, and one of them, Lena, speaks up.
I think it's because the Arab countries didn't want to give up their control over the Palestinians. They saw the Palestinians as a tool to use against Israel.
That's a good point. But what about the fact that the Palestinians rejected the UN partition plan in 1947?
The students murmur in agreement, and another student, Tom, speaks up.
I think it's because the partition plan was unfair to the Palestinians. They were being asked to give up too much of their land.
Okay, let's move on to question number 3. Why haven't Arab countries, notably Egypt, opened their borders to help the Palestinians in Gaza?
The students look puzzled, and one of them, Karen, speaks up.
I think it's because the Arab countries don't want to take responsibility for the Palestinians. They see them as a burden.
Interesting. Okay, let's move on to question number 4. If Israel is committing genocide, why has the Palestinian population increased over the years?
The students look surprised, and one of them, Jason, speaks up.
I think it's because the definition of genocide doesn't necessarily mean a decrease in population. It means the intentional destruction of a group of people.
That's a good point. Okay, let's move on to question number 5. Why do Palestinians claim indigenous status when there is little archaeological evidence to support their claim?
The students look thoughtful, and one of them, Anna, speaks up.
I think it's because the Palestinians feel a deep connection to the land. They see themselves as the rightful owners of the land, regardless of what the archaeological evidence says.
Interesting. Okay, let's move on to question number 6. What would a Palestinian state look like based on the current actions of the Palestinian Authority and Hamas?
The students look puzzled, and one of them, David, speaks up.
I think it's hard to say. The Palestinian Authority and Hamas have different visions of what a Palestinian state should look like. It's hard to know which one would win out.
That's a good point. Okay, let's move on to question number 7. Why are pro-Israeli gatherings peaceful, while pro-Palestinian ones tend to be violent?
The students look surprised, and one of them, Rachel, speaks up.
I think it's because the pro-Palestinian movement is more radical. They see violence as a legitimate means of achieving their goals.
Interesting. Okay, guys, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for a great discussion. Before we go, I have just one question. I want you to consider this. At the time of the partition, Jordan was part of Palestine. They offered both the Arabs and the Jews a portion of the land. The majority was allocated to the Arabs, while the smaller part went to the Jews. However, if you look at the map, you'll notice that Jordan is a larger portion. So, where is the fairness in this arrangement? Take a moment to reflect.
The students begin to pack up their things and leave the classroom, still deep in thought about the Arab-Israeli conflict. Where do you stand on this?